Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. Shadow over Innsmouth, Chapter 3. It must have been some imp of perverse, or some sardonic pull from the dark, hidden sources, which made me change my plans as I did. I had long before resolved to limit my observations to architecture alone, and I was even then hurrying towards the square in an effort to get quick transportation out of this festering city of death and decay. But the sight of old Zadok Allen set up new currents in my brain and made me slacken my pace uncertainly. I had been assured that the old man could do nothing but hint at wild, conjointed, and incredible legends, and I had been warned that the natives made it unsafe to be seen talking to him. Yet the thought of this aged witness to the town's decay, with memories going back to the early days of ships and factories, was a lure that no amount of reason could make me resist. After all, the strangest and maddest of myths were often merely symbols or allegories based upon truth. And old Zadok must have seen everything which went on around Innsmouth for the last 90 years. Curiosity flared up beyond sense and caution, and in my youthful egotism, I fancied I might be able to sift a nucleus of real history from the confused, extravagant outpouring I would probably extract with the raw aid of whiskey. I knew I could not accost him then and there, for the firemen would surely notice and object. Instead, I reflected I would prepare by getting some bootleg liquor at a place where the grocery boy had told me it was plentiful. Then I would loaf near the fire station in an apparent casualness, and fall in with old Zadok after he had started on one of his frequent rambles. The youth said that he was very restless, seldom sitting around the station for more than an hour or two at a time. A quart bottle of whiskey was easily enough, though not cheaply, obtained in the rear of a dingy variety store just off the square in Elliott Street. The dirty-looking fellow who waited on me had a touch of the staring Innsmouth look. He was quite civil in his way, being perhaps used to the custom of such convivial strangers, truckmen, gold buyers, and the like, as were occasionally in town. Re-entering the square, I saw that luck was with me, for, shuffling out of Payne Street around the corner of the Gilman house, I glimpsed nothing less than the tall, lean, tattered form of old Zadok Allen himself. In accordance with my plan, I attracted his attention by brandishing my newly purchased bottle, and soon realizing that he had begun to shuffle wistfully after me as I turned into Waite Street, on my way to the most deserted region I could think of. I was steering my course by the map the grocery boy had prepared, and was aiming for the wholly abandoned stretch of southern waterfront which I had previously visited. The only people in sight there had been the fishermen on the distant breakwater, and by going a few squares south I could get beyond the range of these, finding a pair of seats on some abandoned wharf, and begin free to question old Zadok, unobserved for an indefinite time. Before I reached Main Street, I could hear a faint and wheezy, "Hey, mister," behind me, and I presently allowed the old man to catch up and take copious pulls from the quart bottle. I began putting out feelers as we walked along the water street, and turned southward amidst the omnipresent desolation and crazily tilted ruins, but found that the aged tongue did not loosen as quickly as I had expected. At length I saw a grass-grown opening towards the sea, between crumbling brick walls, and the weedy length of an earthen masonry wharf projected beyond. Piles of moss-covered stones near the water promised tolerable seats, and the scene was sheltered from all possible view by a ruined warehouse on the north. Here, I thought, was the ideal place for a long sequid colloquy, so I guided my companion down the lane and picked out spots to sit in among the mossy stones. The air of death and desertion was ghoulish, and the smell of fish almost insufferable, but I was resolved to let nothing deter me. About 4 hours remained for conversation if I were to catch the 8 o'clock coach for Arkham, and I began to dole out more liquor to the ancient tippler, meanwhile eating my own frugal lunch. In my donations I was careful not to overshoot the mark, for I did not wish Zadok's venous garrulousness to pass into a stupor. After an hour his furtive taciturnity shewed signs of disappearing, but much to my disappointment he still sidetracked my questions about Innsmouth and its shadow-haunted past. He would babble of current topics, revealing with a wide acquaintance with newspapers and a great tendency to philosophize in sentences village fashion. Towards the end of the second hour, I feared my quart of whiskey would not be enough to produce results, and was wondering whether I had better leave old Zadok and go back for more. Just then, however, chance made the opening, which my question had been unable to make, and the wheezing ancient's rabblings took a turn that caused me to lean forward and listen alertly. My back was towards the fishy-smelling sea, but he was facing it, and something or other had caused his wandering gaze to light on the low, distant line of Devil Reef, then shewing plainly and almost fascinatingly above the waves. The sight seemed to displease him, for he began a series of weak curses, which ended in a confidential whisper and a knowing leer. He bent towards me, took hold of my coat lapel, and hissed out some hints that could not be mistaken. "That's where it all began, that cursed place of all wickedness, where the deep water starts. Gate of hell, sheer drop down to a bottom note, sounding line Kentuck. Old Cap'n Obed done it. Him that found out about more was good for him in the South Seas Islands. Everybody was in a bad way them days. Trade falling off, mills losing business, even the new ones, and the best of our menfolk killed a privateering in the War of 1812, or lost with the Elizabeth brig and the Ranger Snow, both of 'em Gilman Venter. Obed Marsh, he had 3 ships afloat, Brigantine Columbia, Brigade Hetty, and bark Sumtree Queen. He was the only one as kept on with the East Indian Pacific trade, though Esdras Martin's barkentine Malay Pride made a venture as late as 28. Never was nobody like Captain Obed. Old limb o' Satan. I can mind him a-tellin' about firm parts and calling all the folks stupid for going to Christian meeting and bearing their burdens meek and lowly, saying they'd orter get better gods like some of the other folk in the Injies. God says I'd bring 'em good fishing in return for their sacrifices, and I'd really answer folks' prayers. Matt Elliott, his first mate, talked a lot too, only he was aging folks doing any heathen things. Told about an island east of Ottaway where they was a lot of stone ruins, older than anybody knew anything about. Kind of like them on Pond Nape in the Carolinas, but with carvings of faces that look like big statues on Easter Island. They was a little volcanic island near that, too, where they was other ruins with different carvings. Ruins all worn away like they'd been under the sea often, and with pictures of awful monsters all over 'em. Well, sir, Matt, he says the natives around there had all the fish they could catch and sported bracelets and armlets and head rigs made out of queer kind of gold and covered with pictures of monsters, just like the ones carved over on the ruins on the little island. Sort of fish-like frogs or frog-like fishes that was drawn in all kinds of positions, like they were human beings. Nobody could get about of where they got all that stuff. And all the other natives wondered how they managed to find fish in plenty when the very next islands had lean pickings. Matt, he got to wondering too. And so did Captain Obed. Obed, he notices, besides, that lots of the handsome young folk can drop a sight for a good year to year, and that they wasn't many old folks around. Also, he thinks some of the folks done look queer, even for Kanakys. It took Obadiah to get the truth out of them heathen. I don't know how he done it, but he began by trading for the gold-like things they wore, asking them where they come from, and if they could get more, and finally wormed the story about old Chief Wallachia, they called him. Nobody but Obadiah ever believed the old yeller devil, but the captain could read folks like they was books. Nobody ever believed me now when I tell 'em, and I don't suppose you will, young feller. Though come to look at you have kind of got them sharp reading eyes like Obadiah had. The old man's whisper grew fainter, and I found myself shuddering at the terrible and sincere portentousness of his intonation, even though I knew his tale could be nothing but drunken fantasy. Well, Sir Obadiah, he learned that they's things on this earth as most folk had never heard about and wouldn't believe if they did hear. It seems these Kanakys had sacrificed heaps of their young men and maidens to some kind of god things that lived under the sea, and getting all kinds of favors in return. They met the things on the little fish islet with the queer ruins, and it seemed them awful pictures of frogfish monsters were supposed to be pictures of these things. Maybe they were kind of critters as got all the mermaid stories and such started. They had all kinds of cities on the bottom, and as got all the mermaid stories and sex started. They had all kinds of cities at the sea bottom, and this island was heaved up from there. Seems there were some of the things alive in the stone buildings when the island come sudden to the surface. And that's how the Kennedys got wind that they were down there. Made sign talk as soon as they got 'em over, been scared, and pieced up a bargain for long. Them things like human sacrifices had 'em for ages afore, but lost track of the upper world after a time. What they done to the victims, it ain't for me to say. I guess old Obed wasn't too sharp about asking, but it was all right with the heathens because they had been having a hard time and was desperate about everything. They give a certain number of young folk to the sea things twice every year. May even Halloween regular as could be. Also give some of the carved knickknacks they made. What the things agreed to give in return was plenty of fish. They drove 'em in from all over the sea, and a few gold-like things now and then. Well, as I say, the natives met the things on the little volcanic islet, going there in canoes with the sacrifices a certainty and bringing back any of the gold-like jewels as was coming to 'em. At first, the things didn't never go into the mainland, but after a time they come to want to. Seems they hankered after mixing with the folk and having gent ceremonies on the big days, May Eve and Halloween. You see, they were able to live both in and out of the water, what they call amphibians, I guess. The Kanakees told 'em as how folks from the other islands might want to wipe 'em out, about if they got wind of their being there. But they says they don't care much because they could wipe out the whole brood of humans if they willed to bother. That is, any as they didn't have certain science sect was used only by the lost old ones, whoever they were. But not wanting to bother, they'd lay low when anybody visited the island. When it comes to mating with them toad-looking fishes, the Kanakee kind of balked, but finally they learned something as they put a new face on the matter. Seems the human folk had kind of relation to sek water beasts, and that everything alive come out of the water won't, and only needs a little change to go back again. Them things told the Kanakee that if they mixed blood, they'd be children as looked human at first, but later turned more and more like the things, till finally they'd take 'em to the water and gin the main lot of things down there. And this is the important part, young fella. Them as turned into fish things and went down into the water wouldn't never die. Them things never died, except they were killed violent. Well, sir, it seemed by the time Obadiah knowed them islanders, they were all full of fish blood from them deep water things. When they got old and began to shew it, they were kept hid until they felt like taking to the water and quitting the place. Some were more teched than others, and some never did change quite enough to take to the water, but mostly they turned about just the way them things said. Them as was born more like the things changed early, but them that was nearly human sometimes stayed on the island till they were past 70, though they usually go down under for trial trips afore that. Folks that had took to the water generally come back a good deal to visit, so a man should be a-talking to his own 5 times great-grandfather who'd left the dry land a couple of 100 years or so afore. Everybody got about the idea of dying except in canoe wars with other islanders, or as sacrifices to the sea gods down below, or from snake bite or plague or sharp galloping ailments or something afore they could take to the water, but simply looked forward to a kind of change and wasn't a bit horrible after a while. They thought what they'd got was well worth all they had given up, and I guess Obed kind of come to think the same thing himself when he chewed over the old Wallakee's story a bit. Wallakee, though, was one of the few as hadn't got none of the fish blood, being of a royal line that intermarried with royal lines on other islands. Wallakee, he shewed Obed a lot of rites and incantations